After the dive footage leaked, the world reacted the way it always does. Too late. Experts immediately began arguing over terminology. Governments debated jurisdiction. News channels slowed the clips, enhanced them, and dissected every single frame. But here's the thing. No one argued about whether something was down there. The only debate was about what to call it. The town, once a quiet fishing village, became a pilgrimage site. But people weren't coming for answers. They were coming for confirmation. They arrived quietly. Cars parked for miles along the coastal roads. Tents were pitched just inland, dotting the landscape. There were no signs, no chants, no angry mobs. Just waiting, a silent, collective vigil. People would walk to the edge of the boundary, that invisible line where the sea had stopped, and they would just stare out at the unnaturally calm water. And so many of them felt it, almost immediately. That strange pressure building in their chests. That undeniable sensation of being seen, of being acknowledged by something immense. The sea didn't advance. It didn't threaten. It didn't repeat the demonstrations of its power from the weeks before. It just waited. And on the 6th day of this strange, silent gathering, the first volunteer stepped forward. Her name was Marianne Holt. She had a terminal illness. Doctors gave her 6 months, maybe less. Before she walked toward the water, she recorded a message on her phone. It wasn't a goodbye. It was an explanation. "I'm not scared," she said, her voice steady. "I'm just tired of pretending fear is the only honest reaction to the unknown." She crossed the boundary barefoot, the wet sand cool beneath her feet. The water accepted her gently. There was no gasp, no struggle, no sudden urgency. She turned once, back toward the silent crowd on the shore, and she smiled. Then she walked forward. She didn't sink. It was more graceful than that. She descended as if walking down a gentle, invisible slope. The surface of the water closed over her head, perfectly, without a ripple. There was a long, heavy silence. Nobody returned. No message in a bottle, no signal from the deep. But something changed. The watchers on the shore, they all felt it. A subtle shift in the air and the very feeling of the place. Like a great weight had been redistributed. That night, people dreamed clearly for the first time in weeks. The nightmares of drowning and falling were gone. In their place was just silence. A sense of depth without the crushing pressure. Word spread. Not through news reports, but quietly, intentionally, from person to person. More came forward. It wasn't just the dying anymore. It was the grieving who had lost a part of themselves. The exhausted, worn down by the noise of the world. The ones who had lived too loudly and now yearned for stillness. They didn't jump. They didn't rush toward their fate. They walked. Calmly, deliberately, they stepped into the sea. I watched it happen again and again. Each time, it was the same. A person would step into the water, and the water would rearrange itself around them, a fluid and silent embrace. With each person who entered, the calm seemed to deepen, to settle more profoundly over the bay. One evening, as the sun was setting, Elias appeared beside me on the beach. He didn't emerge from the waves. He was just there, as if he'd been there all along. "You see it now," he said, his voice as calm as the water. "You're turning death into a service," I replied, the words bitter in my mouth. Elias just shook his head slowly. "That's a human framing," he said. "What is it, then?" I asked, needing to understand. "A correction," Elias answered. "There's too much noise, too much tension, too much surface." I let out a short, harsh laugh. You're recruiting for it? Elias seemed to consider that for a moment. It never asked me to, he finally said. But it listens when I speak. Of course opposition formed. You'd expect it to. Religious leaders called it an abomination. Government officials declared it a public safety crisis. Families came and begged their loved ones not to go. They tried setting up barricades, flimsy fences against the inevitable. The sea did not respond. The boundary line did not move, and people simply walked around the barriers. Sometimes they stepped right over them. There was no force, no coercion, just choice. And that, it turned out, made it impossible to fight. How do you stop something that people are freely walking toward? The news, trying to find a way to talk about it, began calling it the still passage. The phrase stuck. It softened the sharp edges of what was happening, made it sound almost like a peaceful ceremony. Bureaucrats did what they do best. Applications were made. Rules were proposed. Guidelines were drafted for who should be eligible for the still passage. The sea ignored all of it. It had its own criteria. It accepted some, but not others. Those who approached the water filled with desperation or fear were turned away. The water would resist them, pushing gently but firmly, like a parent guiding a child away from danger. But those who approached calmly with a sense of acceptance, they were welcomed. The water would part for them like an open door. And that's when I finally understood. It wasn't feeding. It wasn't a monster consuming victims. It was balancing. It was drawing in the weary, the quiet, the ones ready for a different kind of existence, to counterbalance the chaos on the surface. I went back to the old logbook, to the pages Elias had written just before he disappeared. The words hit me with new meaning. It waits to be chosen. I saw Elias at the shoreline one last time, outlined against a fading light. It's almost done here, he said, looking out at the horizon. Done? I asked, a fresh wave of confusion washing over me. It doesn't stay where it's no longer needed. The ground shifted beneath my feet. Not physically, but conceptually. My whole understanding of the world tilted on its axis. Other places, I whispered, the realization dawning. Elias nodded. Other still waters. That night the boundary receded, not by much, but just enough to be noticeable. Just enough to suggest a kind of satisfaction. The sea had been seen. It had been understood, and finally it had been accepted. And now it was ready to move on. We spend so much time fearing the ocean's power. We fear the force, the violence, the storms that can tear our world apart. But looking back, I realized the most profound and dangerous thing the ocean ever offered us was permission. Join us for the final episode. Still waters never empty.